Hola, me llamo Octavio Andres Cáceres. So both my parents, they speak English, but my father, he was born in Chile, so his first language is Spanish. So at home, I primarily speak English as that's my first language, but since my father being Spanish and Latino, he's taught me a lot of Spanish, and that's more towards the Chilean Spanish side, as in most Latin American countries, there are different, terms or dialects in Spanish. So I've been speaking Spanish ever since I was probably around 2 or 3. That's when my dad would teach me smaller phrases like little words and little phrases here and there. But primarily I speak English. I guess I'd only speak Spanish really when I'm at home, but in the outside sense, I still speak Spanish if I figure out that someone else is Latino or someone else is Spanish speaking. So with reading and writing, it becomes a little more difficult just because I'm not fully fluent in Spanish. I obviously make an attempt by sounding certain things out and by learning the different accents that are in Spanish, but I think as soon as I fluently learn Spanish, then the reading and writing would come just as fast. I don't think there are any language barriers that I deal with at home just because both my parents spoke English. But as I said before, I do like to learn a little more Spanish as I'm getting older, just because I want to maintain that connection with my father, and I feel like it's important to understand the language that he learned when he was growing up, and just to be able to communicate with my extended family. Communicating with my extended family becomes a little harder because especially the family that comes from Chile. Most of them, they speak Spanish as their first language and English as their second language. So it becomes the reverse situation that I have. So when we do try to communicate, it's certain things they do get lost in translation, where a lot of our conversations are very gestural. So between the gestures and I guess us being family, that's the connection that we have. I don't have a lot of friends who do speak Spanish as their primary or secondary language or anything, but because I do speak Spanish, or I do speak certain terms or certain words out loud in Spanish, then I feel like they do pick it up and they do like catch on to what I'm trying to say. And if they don't understand what I'm trying to say, I'm always willing to teach them and educate them on the things or even behavioral habits that I do. And for sure, there's been many situations of isolation and separation, especially for me, someone who is Latino but maybe doesn't visually look Latino, whatever that may be. But once people do find out my name, especially if they're Latino, they're like, "Oh, Octavio, that's a very Spanish name." Then they are very willing to find out more about me and find out where I'm from, especially since Chilean culture, or people from Chile, they're not very as black or negrito, they're more blanquito. So when Latinos do find out that I am Chilean, it's very surprising to them and alarming to them. But once they do find out I am Spanish, then they do, I guess, comfort me a little bit more. But once they find out that I don't speak Spanish fluently, it becomes more isolating for me in senses of group settings. And for family, I feel like it's a very similar situation where when the fluent Spanish speakers try to talk to me, then there's a lot of miscommunication. I think for sure it's affected me emotionally because being separated, obviously, by your family isn't that comforting. It's not that happy for someone. So for example, when my grandmother came from Chile to Canada to visit one time a couple years ago, I wasn't able to fully communicate with her, and I wasn't able to fully understand who she was as a person, or like fully understand her stories, or fully get to know my own grandmother, which is very saddening. I think other than obviously learning the language fluently, I feel like me going to Chile and learning the language there and immersing myself in the culture where my father grew up, where a lot of my family members has grown up, I feel like that would be a lot more meaningful, just to fully understand and be a part of that culture, be a part of that Chilean culture. I would tell my younger self just to never be afraid of learning things, especially for me when it comes to Spanish. I feel like you should always be willing to take the chance and take that leap of faith when you're even a little bit scared to do something.